Mark Carney, widely touted by media and political analysts as the heir apparent to Canada's leadership, entered the election with the established machinery of the Liberal Party behind him. Early projections and initial results seemed to affirm this trajectory. However, as the vote count progressed, a subtle but unsettling undercurrent of irregularities began to surface. Reports of inconsistencies in mail-in ballots, ranging from mismatched signatures to glaring administrative errors, started to trickle in. More critically, shifts in voting patterns late in the process, coupled with statistical outcomes that diverged significantly from pre-election polls, ignited a growing sense of alarm among electoral analysts and the voting public alike. Concurrently, Pierre Poilievre, leading the Conservative Party, had been steadily building momentum. His campaign, characterized by large, enthusiastic rallies, particularly in the western provinces, resonated deeply with a segment of the electorate. Poilievre's message, emphasizing fiscal responsibility and individual freedoms, managed to penetrate even traditionally liberal strongholds, foreshadowing the seismic shifts to come. Despite this burgeoning conservative strength, the Liberals initially claimed just enough seats to scrape together a minority government. However, the razor-thin margin, coupled with the escalating concerns over electoral integrity, created a post-election atmosphere thick with tension and uncertainty. The pivotal moment arrived with the decisive intervention of Supreme Court Chief Judge Richard Wagner. Known for his unwavering commitment to judicial impartiality and upholding Canada's constitutional framework, Wagner made a bold and unexpected move. Rather than rubber-stamping the preliminary election results, he ordered immediate audits and comprehensive recounts in several closely contested ridings. In a powerful public statement, Wagner articulated the fundamental principle that true democracy demands not only proper functioning, but also unquestionable transparency. A message that reverberated profoundly across the nation, striking a chord with a public increasingly wary of the electoral process. The subsequent recount process served to confirm the mounting anxieties, uncovering significant irregularities that were far more widespread than initially feared. Problems were identified in ridings spanning Ontario, Quebec, and Atlantic Canada, regions traditionally considered unshakable Liberal strongholds. These audits exposed a litany of issues: outdated voter registries, incorrect postal codes on numerous ballots, and a troubling prevalence of signature mismatches on mail-in votes. As the recounts progressed, the balance of power began to shift demonstrably, with a number of seats flipping from Liberal to Conservative, fundamentally altering the parliamentary calculus. As these stark realities came to light, a wave of public discontent coalesced into protests across major Canadian cities, including Calgary, Edmonton, Regina, and Toronto. Citizens, fueled by a sense of betrayal and a demand for accountability, took to the streets, advocating for transparency, justice, and in some cases, a full nationwide recount. Mark Carney, in response, issued brief, somewhat anodyne statements reaffirming his commitment to democratic values, yet offered little in the way of concrete clarity or genuine reassurance to a restive populace. In stark contrast, Pierre Poilievre adopted a highly proactive and visible stance. He engaged directly with voters through town halls, articulated strong condemnation of what he described as systemic failures, and vociferously spoke out against any attempts to downplay the gravity of the electoral issues, positioning himself as a champion of electoral integrity. The unfolding crisis further exposed latent fractures within the Liberal Party itself. Behind closed doors, anonymous sources within the party reportedly expressed growing frustration with Carney's leadership, citing a perceived lack of charisma, weak grassroots organisation, and profound dissatisfaction with the leadership's handling of the escalating electoral controversy. Critics within the Liberal ranks argued that the party had fundamentally miscalculated public sentiment, taking voter loyalty for granted and failing to adapt to a changing political landscape. In Alberta, where pre-existing regional tensions over energy policies and provincial autonomy had long simmered, the election turmoil ignited a fervent resurgence of debates about provincial separation. Petitions advocating for referendums on the matter began to circulate with renewed vigour. Similarly, in Quebec, skepticism regarding the legitimacy of the election deepened, even among residents who did not align with the Conservative Party, highlighting a broader erosion of trust in the electoral system. Legal experts and non-partisan watchdog groups swiftly called for investigations that extended far beyond mere recounts. Serious inquiries were initiated into the handling of mail-in ballots, questioning whether electoral laws had been breached, or if warnings from Elections Canada regarding potential vulnerabilities had been ignored. There were particular concerns surrounding the sudden surge of last-minute ballots and the adequacy of existing safeguards designed to prevent fraud and maintain the integrity of the voting process. Pierre Poilievre, capitalizing on the public disquiet, consistently reiterated that the very integrity of Canadian democracy was at stake. At a pivotal press conference, he unequivocally demanded legal accountability for any proven wrongdoing and called for transparent, unhindered investigations. His sentiments were echoed by Governor-General Mary Simon, who, in a rare public statement, underscored the critical need for openness, accountability, and responsible governance to rebuild public trust in the country's democratic institutions. In a truly historic and unprecedented move, Governor-General Mary Simon announced that she would withhold confirmation of any new government until all recounts and judicial reviews were completed. This decision effectively put a pause on the political transition, sending a powerful message about the paramount importance of due process and fairness in the democratic system. Her intervention underscored the gravity of the situation and the commitment to ensuring that the next government would hold a legitimate mandate free from doubt. Mark Carney, visibly taken aback by the Governor-General's decisive action, responded briefly by reiterating his support for democratic principles, but continued to sidestep detailed questions regarding the specifics of the electoral irregularities or his party's handling of the crisis. Internationally, reactions to the unfolding events were cautiously supportive. Organisations such as the United Nations and Commonwealth partners commended Canada's commitment to transparency and adherence to democratic principles, while the US State Department issued a statement acknowledging the developments as necessary steps to bolster public confidence in the electoral process. What initially manifested as a partisan political crisis has, over time, transformed into a broader, unifying effort to preserve and strengthen the legitimacy of Canada's democracy. The national discourse has shifted from mere party politics to a profound examination of the health and resilience of democratic institutions themselves. As recounts continue to yield further shifts in favour of the Conservatives, with more ridings flipping, Pierre Poilievre is increasingly emerging as the likely future Prime Minister of Canada. The Canadian public now holds high expectations for him, not only to spearhead comprehensive electoral reforms, but also to address broader issues critical to national well-being, including restoring public trust, revisiting recent legislation, and ensuring a new era of transparency in government operations. The Governor-General's decisive intervention has also ignited renewed scrutiny of Elections Canada and the mechanisms governing mail-in voting. Canadians, more engaged than ever, are demanding stronger oversight, robust safeguards, and a thorough re-evaluation of electoral processes to prevent future irregularities. This election, despite its contentious nature, has undeniably ignited civic engagement on an unprecedented scale. Young voters are demonstrating heightened involvement. Families across the country are engaged in critical discussions about democratic responsibilities, and citizens from coast to coast are paying closer attention to political processes, demanding accountability from their elected officials and the institutions that underpin their democracy. Canada now finds itself at a pivotal crossroads. The path forward will undoubtedly be shaped by continued public engagement, responsible leadership from all political actors, and a steadfast commitment to institutional reforms designed to ensure that Canada's democracy remains fair, transparent, and truly representative of the will of its people. Stay informed with Canadian Express, bringing you the stories that matter most to Canadians everywhere. Recount confirmed, Carney flips as House of Commons orders election recounts. Ottawa, Canada, the 2025 federal election, initially projected as a straightforward path for Mark Carney and the Liberal Party, has instead plunged Canada into an unprecedented political maelstrom. What began as a seemingly smooth transition of power has devolved into a deeply contested and turbulent process, raising profound questions about the very integrity of the nation's electoral system. Mark Carney, a figure widely anticipated to be Canada's next Prime Minister, entered the election with the backing of the Liberal establishment. Early media reports and political pundits painted a clear picture of a Liberal victory. However, as election night unfolded, a disturbing pattern of irregularities began to emerge. Concerns primarily revolved around mail-in ballots, with numerous reports of inconsistent signatures and administrative oversights. Analysts and voters alike were further alarmed by unusual statistical outcomes and significant shifts in voting patterns that materialized late in the counting process, deviating sharply from pre-election polls. Meanwhile, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party, fueled by large and enthusiastic rallies, particularly across the western provinces, had garnered substantial momentum. Poilievre's message, emphasizing fiscal responsibility and a more limited role for government, resonated with an electorate increasingly frustrated with the status quo, even penetrating traditionally Liberal strongholds. Despite this surge in Conservative support, the Liberals initially claimed just enough seats to form a minority government. This narrow margin, coupled with the burgeoning concerns over the vote's legitimacy, created an atmosphere of palpable tension and uncertainty across the nation. The critical turning point arrived with a decisive intervention from Supreme Court Chief Justice Richard Wagner, a figure renowned for his steadfast impartiality and unwavering commitment to Canada's constitutional framework. Rather than rubber-stamping the contentious election results, Chief Justice Wagner took the extraordinary step of ordering comprehensive audits and recounts in several closely contested ridings. In a powerful public statement, he underscored a fundamental principle of democracy, that the electoral process must not only function correctly, but also demonstrably appear to function correctly to maintain public trust. This resonant message echoed deeply throughout every corner of Canada, from the bustling urban centres to the remote rural communities. The ensuing recount process laid bare a multitude of significant irregularities, particularly in ridings spanning Ontario, Quebec, and Atlantic Canada, regions traditionally considered reliable Liberal strongholds. These rigorous audits uncovered a range of issues, including outdated voter registries, incorrect postal codes on mail-in ballots, and a troubling number of signature mismatches on mailed votes. The cumulative effect of these findings was a dramatic shift in the balance of power, as several seats initially awarded to the Liberals flipped to the Conservatives.